And I'm delighted to introduce Susan O'Hagan, who I met in June at Westgate Hill Primary School in Newcastle. I've worked in the EAL world for 35 years. I've seen lots of wonderful things, and it's a joy when you go into a school and you see something that you've not actually seen before that works beautifully. One of the things Susan is going to talk about is the green screen, which they use there. She's also going to tell us a bit about some of their work with Roma pupils. So over to you, Susan.
Hopefully you can see my screen there. Yeah. So thank you, Graham. That was a really nice introduction, and I will try and be concise for you this evening. But I did think that you would probably want a little bit of context, because I always enjoy hearing about different schools and where they're coming from. So our school, Westgate Hill Primary, is in the west end of Newcastle upon Tyne. It's in an area that experiences very high levels of deprivation. That area of Newcastle has had a very diverse community for quite some time, since the 70s. So back in the 70s, there was a feeling that the school community was predominantly Bangladeshi and Pakistani. In some views, it was perceived as being the Bangladeshi school to some extent, because the percentage of Bangladeshi pupils became so high at one point in the 80s. But as our community has changed, and we've become much more diverse again, so now we welcome pupils from all over the world, really, many more African pupils, Chinese pupils, pupils from Europe, and the vast majority of our pupils are from minority ethnic groups. So it changes from time to time, but it's about 95% of our school population that we would class as being, without being in a negative mindset, as being from backgrounds other than white British. And increasingly, of course, like everybody else, I'm sure, we're seeing more and more children who are coming to us having lived elsewhere on their way to the UK. So, for example, a Libyan pupil who has also lived in Italy for a number of years, they're coming to us in school speaking Arabic and Italian. So that's a new dynamic. Around 20% of our pupils are from countries within Eastern Europe. It's very hard to know how many of those pupils might be from a Roma background. We still have issues with families feeling that they don't want to ascribe themselves as being from a Roma background. So that's an ongoing concern of ours, about, you know, that confidence to ascribe it as Roma. It's something that we really want to develop, and the Romtels project that I'm going to talk about, you'll see, sits firmly within that. Just a bit about the EAL award. I mean, it was really important to us, actually. We worked really hard to develop our practice for our pupils with English as an additional language, and get a little bit of validation and recognition for that, I suppose. We've had a very, very uneven journey in terms of our Ofsted grading. So we've been up, we've been down, we've been back up, we've been really down, and you know, we've had a lot of work to do in restoring our reputation, really, within our local community. So we managed to have an outstanding Ofsted inspection in 2021, which was really good news for the whole community. But we wanted something that would reflect the really hard work that we do with our English as an additional language pupils, because it's something that we really pride ourselves on. And, you know, that element of school life is just, it's such a rewarding place to work. It's such an exciting place to be, that we really wanted to recognise that and have some validation from elsewhere. I think the other part of it is, and I know you were hinting at this earlier on, Graham, is that sometimes you don't know how well you're doing, and what you don't want to do is sit on your laurels and think, oh, well, this school has historically had a very diverse population, so therefore we must be doing a good job, because I don't think one automatically leads to the other. So we wanted to be very wary about that. I'm going to explain to you a little bit about the green screen. I have to manage your expectations first of all. It is nothing to do with movie making or anything like that. So please don't get excited and think I'm going to show you something absolutely technologically advanced. So just if we could go back in time and rename it, we would. So the green screen, I'll just tell you a little bit about the rationale for it, first of all. We wanted to do something that would give pupils, all of our pupils, including our EAL learners, a hook for the lesson to really help them think about what was going to be important in that lesson, what were going to be the important concepts, what was some of the key vocabulary. We really wanted to give children a chance to read, write and speak their own language and share it with others, to enable the children to think about language and languages and notice similarities, differences and patterns and develop that love of languages. And it's all part of a wider approach to enable translanguaging. So we've done quite a bit of thinking about translanguaging, partially because we're so close to Newcastle University and we've had the benefit of being in partnership with them for a number of years. But it's been something that we've really thought deeply about, and I'll come back to that if anybody wants me to. So very simple. So really very simple. At the beginning of each and every session that we teach, we have a green screen, and on the green screen we have one keyword for the lesson, and that's the hook. So for this lesson here, it was I think we were doing non-fiction text, so this was about information. So the keyword is written up in English, but it's covered up and it's revealed after we've had a chance to talk about what that word looks like in lots of different languages. So we use Google Translate, because we're only doing one word unit, so it's not too bad in terms of accuracy and reliability. And we have that keyword translated into all the different languages that are reflected in our class. So it's going to be different in every classroom according to the cohort that is sitting in front of us. And we have a discussion where the children try to guess the keyword or to use what they know about language to read their home language if they can, or to have a look at the languages if they're literate in English and try and make a guess, to notice similarities and differences and try to make that informed guess there. And we use it in all of our lessons across all of the year groups. And the kids absolutely love it. And what I think is that I know sometimes we get really worried about using home languages where perhaps pupils don't read or write their own language. But what this does is it allows a very open-ended approach. So the children who can read their own scripts are able to do that, and they're able to contribute that into the discussion. The class teacher can prompt and say, oh, do you know what this word is in your language? So we've heard from somebody it's this, or now we know the English word. Are you able to tell us what that word is in your home language? So we can use the spoken language rather than the written form if needs be. But for pupils who don't read or write their home language, or actually who are finding it a little bit tricky to make connections with their home language because maybe they're not speaking it as often as they have been previously, it's really nice to just acknowledge their home language and say, oh, look, here's the Latvian. I knew you would like that. I've put Latvian on here for you. And just that sense of being thought about and included makes a huge difference to the children. So we find it's quite open-ended but quite inclusive. The children really get excited about it. We have a brief conversation and then the lesson begins. I think when I've seen this used with perhaps less experienced teachers, it can focus on, well, what is the word? Can we find out what the word is? What's the investigation? Let's just get to the word. But with the most skilled teachers, it's really an appreciation of language, and there's a lot of work that goes on to thinking about, oh, let's look at it in this, let's look at it in the Slovak here, look how similar it is to the Czech. Oh, what does that tell us? Does that give us any clues? And so it can be really quite deep learning. So that's the green screen. And then I'm just going to move on to talk to you about the Romtels project, which is something huge, a huge piece of research that was carried out by Newcastle University across 4 European countries. And I think it took place over about 2.5 years, so absolutely massive. But we were lucky enough to be the UK partner for the Romtels project. And so what I'm going to try and do is just tell you what our takeaways from that project were. So the idea of the project was to increase engagement, and ultimately progress and attainment for pupils from Roma backgrounds across those 4 countries, by thinking about pedagogies for learning. And translanguaging was one of those pedagogies. So as you probably know already, translanguaging is just encouraging and enabling children to use their whole repertoire of languages to make decisions about how they communicate and how they learn. So in a learning scenario, you might get children speaking in their home language, switching backwards and forwards between home language and English, but really making conscious decisions about what's going to best support them. So the project in Newcastle was based on an immersion space. So I've just put a little picture here. It might not be the best picture for you to see. So there was an interactive table in the middle of the space, and then on all 4 walls, there were interactive whiteboards and blackout curtains, so that when the children went into this space, it really felt like they were being immersed in the scenario. And we planned a range of learning inquiries based on our national curriculum topics, because the idea was that it wasn't something that sat outside the curriculum, it sat within the curriculum. And the children carried out a number of learning inquiries based on a scenario, and within the immersion space on the screens, they would see characters talking to them about that inquiry, but talking to them in home language. So it was quite a complex piece of research in terms of the languages spoken by Roma children, because lots of those children had an Eastern European language that they used for administrative purposes, I suppose. I can't think of the right word, in their home countries, but they also often spoke community languages that were Roma languages. And so we asked our parents in our community to help us not just translate, but really think about how to present all of that information in languages that the children would understand. So if you think about it, some of the academic words, the children wouldn't know that in Roma, but they might know it in their Eastern European language. So the parents were really translanguaging as well as they were going through this process. I think the takeaways are really what's important here. The technology in the room is now probably defunct. You know what it's like, you buy a piece of technology and you just can't keep up with the pace. But it wasn't the technology that was the important thing. The important piece of learning was around the impact that using their home language in school had on the pupils. So that was really, really powerful. The project involved translating the pupil talk back into English so that teachers could actually see the quality of discussion going on in each of the inquiries. And it was absolutely mind-blowing to see what the children were talking about in their discussions with each other, and how they were using their full repertoire to make connections and really think through the inquiry and then present it in English at the end. But there's a whole series of video clips on the website there, and you'll see there's a couple in particular where the children are absolutely blown away by the fact that their language is being used in school, because it's the first time that's ever happened for them. So their European languages, Romanian, Czech, Slovak, those were used in school, but the Roma community languages had never been used in such a high status kind of place before for these children. And it was the same for the parents when they came to the university to have a look around, to be part of the project, to do the translating. A lot of our parents had never been to the university before and had never had anybody showing an interest in home language. So it was really transformational. It created really tight bonds between us as a school and our parents. These are our parents here on the front of the booklet. And those parents remained engaged with us for a number of years afterwards. We just had that really close relationship that we could draw upon. They were much more keen to participate in school life. And as I said to you before, it wasn't the technology that was the takeaway, it was the approach, it was the importance of translanguaging as a pedagogy and as something that we can enable in the classroom all of the time. We'll probably never be able to recreate that technology ever again, but that really wasn't what was important to the staff. And the staff still talk about the impact that this project had on them as teachers. that's really a quick overview, but there is so much information on this on the Romtels project website, starting to look a little bit dated now as everything does online, but there are videos that you can watch where you can see the children translanguaging and you can see the English translation, you can see their thought processes, and I think you would find it really interesting if you were able to put the time to it. The other thing that's on the website are 3 booklets which are around the pedagogies, so you could download those booklets by themselves and just dip into them as and when you wanted. But as I said, it was a project that's really resonated with us, and it's really stuck with us as teachers.